Hey everyone, Knowledge here with Reach Your Summit. In this video, I want to give you all an update on some of the gear that I've been using this year. Gear that I put videos up on this channel for, giving you a first look. If you want to see the gear that I'm going to go over in this video in more detail, I'm going to put the links for those first look videos in the video description for this video below. So let's get right into it. All right, first up on the list is a piece of gear that is footwear, and I put this video up on the channel about a couple of years ago as a first look. I've been using it exclusively for winter time and the transition of shoulder seasons, and that is the Altra Lone Peak 4.0 RSM mids. These shoes have about 400 miles in them. Been really happy with them. I find them to work really well for me, and I have a brand new pair set aside for when these eventually give out so I can have something else for the winter. If I'm going to be in an area like the Presidential Range in the White Mountains, or an area that's really susceptible to intense cold conditions, really treacherous wintry conditions, then I might increase to a more stable type of boot, something that's insulated. But in most cases, I find this to work really well for me. I've used this up in Vermont in really heavy snow. I've used it on the Appalachian Trail, New Hampshire, and southern New England. The waterproofing is still there. Don't have any extensive wear on the outside of the shoe, which is most likely going to be associated with the fact that I use these in wintry conditions and I'm not beating them up with roots and rocks and pavement and things like that in 3-season conditions. The shoe is not insulated, but I run really warm, so I find it to work very well for me. I don't get too uncomfortable. I haven't had any blisters in these shoes, and I really love the wide foot-shaped toe box, and I also like the zero drop. The zero drop works for me. I love the natural feel that I get with these shoes when I'm walking on snow, ice, roots, rocks, things like that. Just kind of gives me a closer feel to the ground and just wraps around everything nicely. These don't offer a lot of ankle support. My ankles are very strong. I don't have any major issues with that, but they do offer a little bit of stability. I'm also looking at using these this year for winter bike packing trips and winter bike commutes with race face Chester pedals, and when I don't need a shoe that's really stiff. When I do, I'm going to be transitioning to a more appropriate winter cycling shoe. But in most cases with that flat platform, I'm looking at using these. Still have a good amount of tread on the bottom of the shoe. Overall, I've been very, very happy with this over the last couple of winter seasons. I have also been able to use this shoe with micro spikes on trips, and I've also been able to use snowshoes with these without any major problems. They work really well with them. Everything is nice and secure and stable. I was really happy to have that type of experience with this shoe and not having to switch to something else. Overall, with my experience with the shoe, I've been very happy with the event fabric that this uses. My Derigo 2 tent also uses event fabric, and I find that it works just as well as many Gore-Tex products, which I've also been very happy with in the past. These do keep my feet dry for a relatively long period of time and also breathe decently. You can't have both of those 100% in my experience. You kind of have to be willing to make a compromise somewhere between one or the other. But my feet have stayed pretty dry in these. The breathability and the waterproofing on this works pretty well. This shoe actually is what got me into the Lone Peak series and transitions us to the next shoe that I am going to talk about, which is the Altra Lone Peak 4.5 non-waterproof low shoes. I prefer the non-waterproof shoes for 3-season trips. When I need to, I will pair these shoes with gaiters and help keep debris and things out, keep my feet a bit cleaner. These I have 522 miles in, and the bottom is starting to get a good amount of wear down near the heels and also up under the metatarsal area and the toes. I have no issues with the toe caps peeling at all, and I've been really happy to see that Altra has addressed that issue. I did experience that with the 4.0s, but I find that these shoes have been very durable. They are also going to be a little stiffer than the 4.0s, and I find the toe box and the midfoot of the shoe is a little smaller, a little bit narrower overall. And in that case, I still prefer the 4.0s. I really like the wider midfoot and the slightly wider toe box that these provide. And I generally prefer the slightly softer cushion of the shoe as well. So I do have a brand new pair that have been sitting in the box, ready to go once the 4.5s wear out. But overall, this has been a great shoe. I've worn this up in New Hampshire and the White Mountains on multiple trips this year. I wore this on the Appalachian Trail, the New England Trail, on a thru hike recently of the Tungus Trail. They breathe really well. When they get wet, they dry very quickly, and I love the continuation of the zero drop and having that natural feel on the terrain that I'm walking on. Overall, this has been a really good shoe. Been very, very happy with this shoe. Like I said, minor gripes that I have are just preferences that I had with the 4.0s. So I'll continue to use both of these shoes and really look forward to what the Lone Peak 5.0s are like when they come out. And lastly, not a single blister in the 4.5s or the 4.0s. They've both been excellent shoes. All right, this next one I've been getting a lot of questions about, and that is the REI Flash Air 1 tent. This, I've gotten a fair amount of use out of this year. I'm more a hammocker, and I'm going to get into that in just a few minutes. But I have been able to use this tent in varying conditions. Overall, it performed very well. I used this tent on my recent thru hike of the Tungus Trail. I also used it in various trips up in Vermont, on the Appalachian Trail, the New England Trail, and some other spots around New England. And it's performed really well in rainy conditions and winds. I've had this out in up to 30-mile-an-hour winds without any major issues. I haven't experienced anything beyond that in this tent yet, so I can't vouch for how it would handle in higher winds. In the heavy rains, no issues at all, stayed completely dry. And being a single wall tent, you can experience a little bit of condensation no matter what single wall tent you go with. But overall, this tent breathes very well. It has the vent in the head and the foot area of the tent, also in the ceiling. And then just having that mesh on one complete side of the tent allows it to breathe really well. Good campsite selection is also something that will help mitigate any condensation. My experience with that has been great. If I do have a little bit inside of the tent, I will end up just carrying a quick dry towel with me if I think I'm going to experience it on that trip, and just dab it dry and let it air dry while I'm packing everything up in the morning, and I've never had any major issues with it being completely soaked. This tent is a breeze to set up, really easy. I love the option of having either a tent pole or a trekking pole to use with it. The footprint is pretty generous for a one-person tent, but being a one-person tent and being at 5'10", I do find this tent to be a little small. It works for me. It works for me with having my small backpack inside. If you're taller than my height, you might want to consider going with the Flash Air 2 for more room, or looking at some other options. But if you're around my height and you want something that has a minimal footprint like I did when I looked at this tent, then this could be a great option. I like to look at it more as a livable bivvy. Very easy to get in and out of the door, and the vestibule is pretty generous in size for the style of tent that it is. I love the green color, so I can use it on occasions where I don't want to be seen or I don't want to affect somebody else's wild experience while they're out. I've also used this tent on bike packing trips, and it fits really nicely in the handlebar bag without having any clearance issues with the shifters or the brakes. I didn't go with the footprint for this tent, so when I've been using it, I've just been using a Polycro footprint that I purchased from Six Moon Designs. This is the smaller one for the Lunar Solo, and I find that it fits underneath this tent nicely. I have just a little bit of overlap for the vestibule area, and that allows me to have a little protection if I'm leaving any wet clothing outside of the tent at night, or my pack, things like that, if stuff is wet and I don't want to bring it in the tent with me. The reflective guy line is excellent, allows me to be able to see it at night, so I'm not tripping over it if I have to get out to go to the bathroom or anything. And it's just nice and light and packable, and a really good price. So I look forward to using this more in the future on backpacking trips and bike packing trips, and seeing how it holds up. But overall, been happy with this. Part of my sleep system for the Flash Air 1 tent, and also the Dirigo 2 on occasion this year, has been a switch to the Sea to Summit Lite XT insulated pad. 4 inches thick, a little bit wider than your traditional sleeping pad. I find that I don't have my arms dangling off the sides. I find this to be really comfortable, and it's worked really well on the trips that I have used it on. And it works also in conjunction with my Sea to Summit Aeros down pillow and the pillow lock system, which is a really nice feature that I've been enjoying, keeping the pillow in place with the pad, and it's just worked really well inside of my tents this year. But the bread and butter for me is my hammock system. So I put a video up on this at the beginning of the year. This was completely customized with products that I purchased from various small cottage vendors. The hammock is the Dream Hammock Darien. It's 11 feet long by 64 inches wide, and the Lite AF 11-foot Dyneema hammock tarp with doors. And this system has been flawless. I get such a great night's sleep with this. Really simple for me to set up with my Dutchwear straps and Myers Hammock Tech Evo loops. This has worked really well in windy conditions. It's worked well with the tarp with doors in rainy conditions also. Kept me very dry, very comfortable. And here in the Northeast, we do not have a shortage of trees, so my options are less limited with the hammock system than it could be with a tent. So I use this up in New Hampshire, also in Vermont, and along the Appalachian Trail this year, and the New England Trail as well. I have about 60 nights in this system so far, and it's worked really, really well. Now, part of my sleep system for the hammock has been a continuation of the Sea to Summit Aeros pillow, but I've also been using top quilts and under quilts, and the under quilt that I used for many 3-season trips has been the Hammock Gear Phoenix 40. This is a customized one, 3/4 length. It's customized with the fill and also the additional overstuff. I have 2 ounces of additional overstuff in this under quilt, and it's kept me very comfortable and warm. I'd say right down to that temperature rating. This has been great at 40 degrees. It's going to vary per individual, but I find it to work well for me before I start getting a slight chill. In extended conditions, when I'm out in the winter time, I've been using the Hammock Gear incubator like I did on my Tully Trail trip in the winter, and also up in Mount Greylock when it got down to -20 at night. I find I prefer under quilts over sleeping pads in the hammocks, and I'll put a video link in the video description below for a video that I put together on sleeping using different insulation systems with a hammock. So you can check that out too. Now, I had 2 videos on this channel giving you a first look at a couple of headlamps. One was the Black Diamond Sprint 225. The other was the BioLite Headlamp 200. Sadly, the Black Diamond met its end, and when I went to replace it, I ended up picking up something else. The headlamp did work really well. I loved the rechargeable feature to it. I've been trying to drift away from using headlamps with batteries and going with something that's USB rechargeable, just because I always have a battery bank with me on my trips, and I want to be able to reduce my waste, and also having the battery pack already just allows me to be able to recharge the devices when I need it, so I'm not having to carry any additional weight with extra batteries. The Sprint was very stable when I was running, and it worked well when I was backpacking as well. It did not have a red LED, but I didn't find that to be much of a major issue with the optical lighting update that it had to the headlamp. As I mentioned, that ended up getting damaged, and when I went to go replace it, I ended up picking up something else, which I'll get into in just a minute. Then the BioLite Headlamp 200. This is really nice. It was around the same weight as the Black Diamond Sprint. It sits nice and flush along the head. This does have the red LED, and I used this on the Tully Trail backpacking trip and a bunch of other trips throughout this year. And it works well. The USB recharging is pretty quick. Both of the headlamps lasted about 2 to 2.5 hours before I needed to recharge it, and that's on when it's on the highest output. There is a dim feature with this headlamp too, and both had lockout modes. Overall, if you're looking for a nice lightweight headlamp, this has definitely been a great one that I've been using, but I wanted something brighter, and I was intrigued by this headlamp that I'm about to show you, which has transitioned me to this one for the rest of this year, and see how it performs outside of that. That is the Petzl Swift. This is 900 lumens, and it uses reactive lighting. It is USB rechargeable. I've had this on over a dozen trips now, and I still have yet to recharge it. I have been using it mostly on the lowest setting. It's very, very stable. It works really well on backpacking trips. The battery is completely removable and replaceable, which was something that I liked. There's a nice cooling chamber that's between the actual bulb and the battery itself to reduce any heat. It is a little bit bulkier than the BioLite Headlamp 200, but I don't find it to be much of a compromise. This headlamp is still very stable, very comfortable. It's been working really well for me, and it's super, super bright. This is most likely going to be the headlamp that I use on next year's Allegheny 100 challenge, as long as it's able to take place next year. This is what I ended up picking up when I went to go replace the Black Diamond Sprint for another one. Final piece of gear is something that I use to carry all of these items, and that is my custom-made Superior Wilderness Design Superior 35, made out of Dyneema composite fabric, and taking influence from some other packs I've used over the years, from Z-Packs, Hyperlite Mountain Gear, and Atom packs. And this pack has over 100 days on it and still no major signs of wear. The snack pocket at the bottom is still intact, no major issues with it. I do clean my packs when I get back from trips if they really need it, or over time, just to reduce hiker odors that may be acquired with it over time, but also to keep the performance of the fabrics working the way that they should. The pack is very, very comfortable, very stable. The features that I had requested with this pack when I purchased it have worked really well for me on all of my trips that I've used it on this year. I used it on the Tunxus Trail thru hike recently, and you'll see it being used in that video, and multiple other trips. There have only been a few trips this year where I had transitioned to the Hyperlite Mountain Gear Southwest when I needed to carry more weight or bulkier items. I've had up to 20 pounds inside of this pack and haven't had any issues with carrying it at all. My pack liner that I use is just a Nylaflume pack liner, just to give it a little bit of additional waterproofing. The Dyneema with the polyester does work really well. It's almost completely waterproof on its own, minus the stitching areas, but that is taped and sealed as well. And I just like to use a liner anyway for extra precaution, but I haven't had any issues with waterproofing in this pack. And then I just use the Z-Lite sit pad in the back as additional cushion and support. This pack has excellent craftsmanship. I was really happy to be able to have something made for me with features that I preferred, or found that I preferred with other packs that I used over time. And I really look forward to seeing how much longer this pack holds up. I'm a big fan of Dyneema composite fabric, and I've also been very happy with a lot of my bike bags that use X-Pack. And so my next pack, I might end up going with something that's X-Pack. Dyneema has been just as good, and I haven't had any major issues with this pack. So that's a quick update on some of the gear that I had first looks for on this channel, to share my experience with you on them a little bit more. Have you used any of this gear, or do you have any questions on it? If you do, please feel free to leave a comment below. I always love reading everyone's feedback, seeing your experiences with the gear that I'm using as well, and also helping address any questions that you have to help you out as well. If you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, consider doing so, because I'm always adding new content to it. As always, thank you for subscribing and for viewing this video and the other videos on this channel. I greatly appreciate it all. I'll see you on the trail.